Welcome to the Tech and Accent podcast.
Here you will learn about being an expat, working abroad, technology, and more from non-native English speakers. Let's get into it.
Welcome to another episode of Tech and Accent, and today we have a guest that is living in Brazil and has an amazing story that was in Amsterdam. And today we have Laura. Welcome to the podcast, Laura.
Hey, yeah, I'm pretty glad to be here, and I'm sure that we're going to talk about a lot of interesting things today about career and other stuff.
And I think I started in the wrong way because I said Laura, and it's really hard to change my language to English and say the name in Portuguese. Is that something common that in your life?
I think I really don't have a strong preference, like when my colleagues from other countries pronounce my name. I think now that I work in a American company, in general they pronounce my name as Laura, but when I was working in Holland, a lot of Dutch friends would pronounce my name as Laura, with like a strong pronunciation on the R that I even don't know how to do this. So yeah, I really like actually to listen to the different variations, so it's not a problem.
So you have a bit of what I suffer, because my name, even in Brazil, nobody could tell what was the real pronunciation. So you have an amazing story, and people talk about being senior with 2 years of experience. And you, with 2 years of experience, were able to live abroad. So this is amazing.
Yes, it was pretty fast, the transitions. I think there's definitely a lot of factors into this that we can talk more about.
So to start, what about you introduce yourself and tell us a bit of where you come from, where did you go, and how was your story until Holland or Netherlands? I don't know what's the right way to say it.
Okay, so first of all, I think you already know, my name is Laura Beatris. I'm a software engineer in WorkOS, which is an American startup in the dev tooling world, and essentially right now I'm based in Florianópolis in the south of Brazil, but last year I was living in Amsterdam in Holland, the Netherlands, and I was working in a consultants company called Reactor. So I think I'm going to try to explain as fast as possible how I get there, if that's cool, but I don't know if it's going to take a lot of time.
Take your time. We are here to listen to your story and to learn with you.
Okay, let's start from my first job and how I got into the software engineering industry. I started in 2019. I was 17 years old, had just finished high school, and I joined essentially a technical degree that we call here in Brazil, but I think in a lot of countries this is understood as an associate degree. But I pretty much entered the system and analysis development technical course. And when I joined the classes, I started pretty much right away looking for an internship or like a junior engineering job. I wanted to start working, start writing software, and pretty much also having a salary. So pretty much it was really difficult for me because I had zero experience. So we start from that basis, right? How I got my first job and the road to build a studying framework and get experience to get there. I applied for many technology companies inside of Florianópolis. As a side note, Florianópolis is the city where I currently live, in which, as I mentioned, I went to university. It's called as the Silicon Valley of Brazil. because here we have a huge tech campus. There's a lot of IT companies, especially foreign companies, that come to Florianópolis and build their Brazilian office here. At a time, there was this huge explosion of companies that were coming to my city, which was one of the reasons that I chose the IT career, because I saw an opportunity to have a good career, good salary, and also to fulfill one of my dreams, that was to live abroad. And we are going to get into this point later. But I started applying to all of those companies, internships and also junior engineer roles that required previous experience. And I got a lot of rejections, of course. And how I approached it was to keep applying, consistently applying, even when I got a rejection. And I started studying a lot. I remember that it was like 3 hours to go to my university by bus, and also 3 hours to go back home. And I would still get home and study for more than like 2 hours. I would study for the technologies and the things that those jobs were mostly asking in Florianópolis. A lot of the companies, they were having like a stack with Python or JavaScript, and I was studying both things. Looking back, I think I was maybe studying a lot of different things, and it was really confusing, but I was like, putting this in an expression, I was shooting in a lot of different sides. I was betting a lot of different sides. I just wanted an opportunity. So I was studying Python, I was studying JavaScript, I was studying everything in parallel with studying all of the basis software engineering concepts, like programming logic, database stuff, the things that I would also have classes in university. And I always had this approach of learning in public. So I remember that even like the most silly stuff I would put in GitHub, like simple algorithms I would put in GitHub. My GitHub activity since then was pretty high, and it was, I wanted to have like a way to track my studying hours, my growth on my GitHub account. Was a really nice tool for this. And so there was the moment that was the first like achievement that had put me on the track for everything else that came on my career. It was when I got my first junior engineer job in 2019 in a digital agency / consultants company in Florianópolis. And I remember that when I got the interview, was pretty clear to the head of the engineering department that I was pretty like a junior. I was really, really junior, because he asked a couple of database questions that I couldn't even answer. But then he started to ask a couple of questions more general around like JavaScript libraries and stuff that I had coded a lot and studied a couple of hours, and I managed to reply like with the right answer. And then he looked at my GitHub and he noticed that I was studying almost every single day. And so at a time, they just needed someone that could be open to learn and do basic like consultancy stuff, and be able to grow faster, be hired, and then in a couple of months you would be able to take a project and ship to production. So I didn't really care about the salary. I remember that they proposed it like I think was 1,500. It was I think a minimum wage salary in Brazil, so that was good for me. And that was the first thing. And one thing to call out here, I think that company didn't really have the best learning environment. It was it didn't have like management attention thing that you have in a lot of like big companies out there, like Google. You start with an engineering manager, you already have like a learning path, a growth. plan internally. I didn't have any of this when I started as a junior engineer. It was a pretty toxic environment in my opinion. But I want to call out that even if in my point of view it was toxic, it was really important, and I'm really grateful for my boss at the time to have given me the opportunity to work there. It was the first time that I got real exposure to software situations in general, of like people building and thinking about the users and having production outages and doing things wrong, and then like being exposed to everything was the first point of failures that I got to experience. So on that time, I didn't really have a senior guiding me to go through the problems and the projects that I had to work on. I was given the requirements, and yeah, I was free to ask to them. They were pretty nice colleagues as well, but they had a lot of things on their plate, so they couldn't really have time to sit next to me and let's do some pair programming, let's do some PR review. Another thing that I remember, which is really funny, but at the time was really chaotic, is that I could really merge straight to main. There wasn't pull requests or things like that. So on that sense, I didn't have someone doing critical comments on my code and then saying, oh, you should learn more about this, we should improve those things. So everything, it was from my point of view of growing, which wasn't that bad at the beginning. I was just getting the code in production working, and I was studying pretty much on my free time. So I had to have the consistency and resilience to build my own growing framework, to understand what were the things that I needed to study in order to be ready for next career opportunities or to grow internally. There wasn't really someone that was saying oh, Laura, you should study those technologies or you should work on those things. I had to figure it out at those points. But in terms of soft skills, I would say that I learned a lot about internal conflicts and human beings working with each other. There's definitely a lot of challenge to be understood, and especially how to deal with difficult situations when you ship something wrong in production and you have to fix it. There's, I think, a really weird moment when I shipped a set timeout in production by accident because I was debugging something. We didn't have any pull request process. I merged it straight to main, and it was a really important website. It was a TIM, TIM, the telecom company in Brazil that we were selling phone plans. It was an e-commerce website, and I added a delay when you press on a button accidentally. I don't even know why I added this, but I was debugging something. I accidentally botched production, and then the senior engineer came to me and said I don't know why you added this, but a lot of customers are starting to complain, and we lost a lot of money at the end because folks, they would just leave the website. They wouldn't wait to buy. I think it was 5 seconds of delay. It was a lot. So you start learning with those things. Even though it's silly, I learned that I should always double check my code. I should always do automated tests and also test it manually and have other people to look at it, because obviously if there was a pull request, a senior engineer would be able to detect that piece of code there for sure. So yeah, it was for sure the first experience was really important. Then I left this job to a next opportunity. I wanted to work remotely, still for Brazilian companies at that point. I didn't even know that was possible to work for remotely to other countries. but I left to work for a remote company, a remote consultants company, and this would be really good because I got like 6 times the salary that I was receiving as a junior engineer. So it was a huge increase, and also I could work from home, so I didn't have to take a bus every day, and then I could essentially take this time that I was commuting to study and work on my personal growth again. I started on this company. The stack was pretty much aligned with what I was advocating and learning since the beginning of my career, which was JavaScript, and in terms of UI development was React, and for API development, Node. But the consultants actually company that one actually didn't use Node. It was using Elixir, which was my first exposure to another programming language, really in production, and especially a functional programming language, which was something really different than what I was used to. But anyhow, it was interesting, the scale of how things changed. I took much more responsibilities, and the deadlines, they were also more difficult. I remember that every week you'd have to release something big. So I learned to release things faster, to code faster. That was something that was really important, and also was the first time that I started to have code reviews. So that helped a lot. There was a senior engineer reading my code, and I think I had a PR that had like 100 comments, and that, when I look back, I was like, that was crazy. But at the same time, the amount of things that I learned was totally worth it to go through the like 100 comments. So I learned a lot technically, and also in terms of soft skills to handle a higher pressure environment. Also in parallel, I want to do a zoom out a little bit here, and also emphasize that besides those job changes, I was pretty active in networking and also in learning in public, as I mentioned. During this time, since my first junior engineer job, I was going to meetups, I was going to conferences, I was giving talks. This was a way for me to teach others and to recognize the things that I didn't really know and the things that I had to improve. When you explain to others, you can really understand what you don't actually know. And this is something, it's important for my entire career, and still nowadays it's like a principle of my life, of a growing framework that I have. And I used to do since then. I was doing this by teaching in public, and at the same time, a lot of engineers that I got to know on that path. I also joined it like a boot camp at a time of a really well-known startup in Brazil, which is called Rocket Seed. And I got to know amazing people that started to work with me years after. Guilherme Rhodes, Luke Morales, they were working inside of Rocket Seed, and I was actually a student. They were like engineers. So it was pretty nice, both like technically to learn the framework, I think was React at a time, and to get to know those people. And later on, Guilherme worked with me in the Netherlands, like I think was 1 year after, actually years after we started working together in the Netherlands. And Luke worked with me in the startup that I am at the moment. So it's crazy. That's one suggestion that I give to all the audience, like try to do some networking in parallel, try to teach others. I know that it's difficult because I don't know about your habits, I don't know about your life situation. I understand that sometimes folks doesn't have time to study outside of working hours. But if you do have the opportunity to do something else, if you do have the time, put some effort on joining the engineer community. Every single career has a community. Like doctors, they can go to conferences as well. Doctors can publish papers. They can build their own growing path outside of the hospitals. This is just an example that as engineers, if we have the opportunity to get out of the company that we are, to expand that zone of impact, we can do much more. And I think this was something that by doing since the beginning was definitely one of the things that influenced how I'm able to be where I am in 5 years of career. It pushed me to learn more, to study more, and to have more empathy and be humble with other folks that are also like joining the engineer field at the moment. Now, coming back to my second job as an engineer.
Just before you go,
Okay.
I just want to mention something that you already brought. That is this part of networking and helping the community and learning. I see this as a pattern in most of people that get a job abroad. So I'm just bringing this message to people, like, do it, because this is really helping people to get a job abroad. And I will give you the word again. It's amazing, your story, and I want to hear more.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thanks for calling that out. To be honest, I also noticed that folks that they have been active with their portfolio and networking since the beginning, they are exposed to opportunities abroad much more easily. Obviously, there's also like the other cases where people, they actually don't do this, but they also get an opportunity. But I think from my point of view, and I think you also have the same, it's a minor percentage. But yeah, thanks for calling that out. And then going back to my second job as a software engineer, I think I was still like a junior and mid-level, but I started to take more responsibilities of a mid-level engineer. For sure, the deadlines were also pretty crazy, and that company was a small consultants company. Again, you didn't have an engineer manager with you doing one-on-ones, weekly basis. You didn't have a career path internally. It was just like there was clients with projects and deadlines, and you have to do technical spikes and build features and ship it, and that was it. Learn a lot of new things. But then there was a point that I started to notice that technically I already had learned a lot of things. And in terms of soft skills and handling with high pressure and speedy environments was also good. But I started to get a lot of anxiety. I think this is also something important to mention, right? I don't want to hide those bad points, because I think especially in the IT field, there's a lot of people that go through mental diseases, and the thing is how you handle with it. It's like a nice thing to hear from others. We are working in a high pressure environment where you sit most of the day in front of the computer, and I was also pretty young. I had 18 years old, so you can imagine, like, I wasn't that experienced in terms of life to handle with a couple of situations yet. I didn't have that I didn't have a lot of experiences in general, and I think was my first exposure to anxiety. I started to notice what was it, and I started to take more attention on how could I get out of that anxiety loop. I essentially decided to leave that job because at a time I was still living with my parents. Fortunately, I had that environment around me that I could make that decision. Was really grateful that I was still like in a young age, and I had this life aspects that I could do this move of like, okay, I'm just going to take a time to take care of my health and start studying more to get an opportunity in a company with a better environment, essentially. And I was a couple of months, I think, just studying, and I took time to do more things outside of studying and work, to be more self-aware of a lot of those things. My anxiety ended up like improving, and I was able to then get to a point where I was more comfortable of coming back to looking for a new job. So one thing that I can say about it for folks that are listening, be really careful with this since the beginning of your career. I understand that sometimes we want to study 3 hours per day and still work 8 hours. But I like to bring the cup of coffee comparison here, like a expression, sort of speak. Imagine that you're a cup, and when you're full, you cannot handle things anymore. You need to also be able to be in a situation where you're empty, and then you can put more things into your brain, and you have like more bandwidth to take things. So don't overwhelm yourself right away. Be really careful to not do things in really, how can I say, avoid the extreme sides of the equation. I think that's the best way to explain. Looking back, I was just studying a lot since the beginning of my career, and I don't have regrets because I think this made me where I am nowadays, but I would balance things a little bit. I would go to the gym earlier. I would also then, instead of studying 4 hours, I would go 1 hour to the gym and maybe studying 2. Everything has a balance, and I think I have a lot of friends which are in a similar position as I am now, but they took care of this even earlier, and they were able to find a balance between personal growing and career stuff. So be mindful of this and take care of your health, because this is what is going to make you go like much further on your career without burning out. So
I love those advices, because when I was in the beginning of my career, I had all this, even when I was like late before coming to Canada in 18. So on that years I was really anxious, and before coming to Canada I couldn't sleep well. I had to try to sleep all the night, and was really a nightmare to sleep. So anxiety is really something that everyone should take care, and it's amazing to see you bringing the subject and being aware of this. So thanks for sharing it.
yeah, for sure. And also, like, if I can speak a little bit more about it, I had one colleague when I was working in the Netherlands in another company, and he was like the best engineer that I could work with, but he started to have like a burnout episode, and it was the worst feeling ever, like to see a friend of yours going through this moment. And it's difficult because he was working on a client inside of the company that didn't have a good environment, and he was already going through a hard time in his life. So he took some time off, and he's much better now. But I would say that, yeah, really, for folks, take care of this aspect of the equation here and try to balance things. One thing that really helps me nowadays is to think that the coolest thing about technology is the amount of things that you can learn. This shouldn't make you anxious, actually. This is a good stuff, because I wouldn't like to learn in a field where I already know everything. I think what makes me glad when I start working in a daily basis is because I can work on challenging things and I can keep growing, I don't want to learn everything. I don't want to study 3 hours in a day and already know everything about a framework. I want to take things like one piece by piece, 1% each day. It's better than doing like 50% a day and then not being able to do everything else later on. So slowly learning in your career, it's a much more consistent approach than trying to learn everything faster. You don't need to worry like, oh, but I'm not going to be able to keep up with the career field. One thing that I can tell is that when you get into a senior engineer like a job, or when you start working in companies that have more complex scenarios, even as a junior engineer, the thing that is going to be most required to solve problems and to see software is not necessarily like rough technical capabilities of knowing what to do in a language and a framework, but it's learning how to learn. And you're just going to be able to do this by taking things slowly, being critical, being mindful. So yeah, that's definitely one thing that I would call out for. Okay, so let's go to the moment where I got my first remote job, working from Brazil but working to Portugal. So I was working remotely. I started receiving a salary in euros, and it was a game changer for my entire career, basically. The things that I worked on that period of time when I left my previous job was to prepare myself to handle those technical interviews in another language, and also to mention, I was studying English for a long time. I was studying for like 4 years. In high school, I was already studying English, but I think it's good to mention, right? A lot of folks might be aware of this, but the learning path for learning a new language, it's like every other skill in a certain sense that it really depends from person to person. It really depends from your constraints and the current moment of your life. I started from a really different point of view where my parents, they had the opportunity to afford English course for me. In parallel, like with my high school, that was game changer for me. So the only responsibility that I had was I have to study, and this is something that I'm really, really grateful. I would say that nowadays, if I'm working as a software engineer, it's because of my parents. Like I wouldn't be here just because of my effort of studying, but my parents being able to provide my English education in my high school was the best thing ever. And so I was studying since then. And I always try to study by myself English, like in home, like, watch movies and do a lot of things that English teachers sometimes recommend of listening and writing by yourself. But this wasn't really working for me. So I noticed that when I joined actual English classes with other students and teachers in person, actually asking us to speak things, talk out loud, and this was the first point where I started not being afraid of speaking and not being shy of learning English and committing mistakes. That's one of the biggest rocks that you have to get out of your way. Not being afraid of learning English, not being afraid of speaking. This doesn't only apply to English, right? But it's for really any other language and pretty much any other subject that you want to learn in your life. Don't be afraid of learning and making mistakes in public. So with that was like 4 years of school, learning English, which was the majority of my high school years, 3 years of high school, and those 3 I was in the English school. And this helped me a lot. I even did the TOEFL test because I thought that it was helpful. This was going to be helpful if I was going to work abroad. got a pretty good score at it. I totally forgot what was, but I was really happy. Was really happy when I got in. And yeah, I left the course with the capabilities of speaking in English and understanding, writing as well. But as a disclaimer, my English on that time was actually worse than it is nowadays, right? Because there were so many phases that came after that. Like, I went to live abroad. I had to just survive in English. I couldn't speak in Portuguese at all. So you have a different environment and constraints around you that push you to learn more the language. And then nowadays I work for an American company, and I work in a daily basis with listening to American accent and learning new words, etc. So for sure I learned a lot of stuff since then. But the point that I was there already enabled me to do technical interviews and to be able to essentially convey an information for another person to understand me, have a regular conversation. So I started applying for obviously a lot of companies. And one thing that we have to talk about it here, this is from my perspective. I don't know how accurate it is, but from my experience in 2020, that was like the time that I was applying for remote jobs abroad. There wasn't really a self-awareness in the Brazilian community that you could work as an engineer in Brazil, but receiving a salary in dollars or in euros, and working to abroad companies. And there wasn't enough resources for me to search for, I think, didn't really have this site's going to give you a lot of remote jobs. So I was using LinkedIn jobs, I was using Indeed, and a lot of those jobs being listed there was jobs from American companies that require you to be a US citizen, or that require you to have a valid visa. So I would get rejections right away. Besides the rejections that I would get for my technical experience, I would also get rejections because of a bureaucracy stuff. And also, I think another point important to mention is the motivation of why I started to look for jobs abroad. At a time, I didn't have financial expectations of, I want to increase my salary, I want to receive a salary in another currency. I was pretty much doing it because I had this dream since high school of living in another country. And the thing with that, I used to see a lot of my friends traveling abroad and studying abroad, but my parents, they couldn't really afford this. My father was from the Brazilian Navy, and the salary was just able to pay the school, my English course, and nothing was left pretty much in the month. So that was already what he was able to do. He wasn't able to, pay tickets for me to go to Orlando, in United States, to the Disneyland park, start to study in the United States high school. So the thing was, okay, as a father, I'm paying you for education, and with education that you're going to achieve those other dreams. And I was really going for it. I was studying a lot and studying my English and applying for those companies, because at the end, I wanted to land a remote job that would give me a sponsorship of visa afterwards. So after applying to a lot of those companies, I got an opportunity on a company called YOD. It's a consultants digital agency company that has an office in Portugal, Lisbon, and in London, UK. I was specifically working as a contractor for Portugal. And I remember that at a time I was super, super happy to land that job, because it was going to be my first time working in an environment where I was going to talk English all day. I also had Portuguese support because my manager was from Portugal, so I could speak in Portuguese with him. The folks were super friendly. It was a amazing environment to grow. It wasn't toxic at all. Was, I think, one of the best companies that I worked with so far. And then I was there for like 12 months. I didn't learn a lot technically because I was as a consultant, I was in a startup, right? That was a YOD client, YOD customer. I was essentially onboarded in there, and it was a startup with a lot of problems that I sort of already knew how to solve. It was pretty much just fixing bugs and dealing with communication issues internally. So it was a challenge in order to go through those situations of like a high paced startup, I would say. But the majority of the things that I learned was soft skills related. So being able to go to meetings and talk about engineering stuff in English, internal conflicts also in another language, how to work in a group with different cultures that was engineers from a lot of different countries and different time zones and those things. So it was super amazing. After 10 months, the contract ended. And I remember when it was near the time for the contract to end, I started to look for other options because I didn't really want to bet all of my options that they were going to propose me the Portugal visa to reallocate to Portugal and work from there. So I started work for other companies that could propose me other job opportunities with visa sponsorship. It was really difficult to do so because a lot of the companies I was focusing on Canada. A lot of them at a time, I think they were requiring, bachelor's degree. I'm not even sure what are the requirements nowadays because I stopped looking, but it was pretty difficult to find with the sponsorship for Canada. United States, we don't even need to talk about it. It's like even more difficult. And so I started taking a look at Europe and putting all of my effort there. So on LinkedIn, all of a sudden, like, I got a message of a friend of mine that he basically like sent me a message saying, "Oh, I'm working on this company here in the Netherlands, and we're currently hiring, and I've been following your content on social media, on meetups, etc. And it would be really nice to work with you. Like, do you want to do the interview process?" So again, like coming back to this point of networking, I think this was essential for me. So at a time, I couldn't really do the interview process because I think it was still four months missing for my contract to end. And I basically said, look, I think at the moment it's not a great timing because even if I pass the interview process, I'm not going to be able to go. I want to finish my contract at YOD, and I also don't want to put something on my resume that I'm just here like 4 months. It's going to be too weird, so I want you to stay more time. And yeah, so pretty much pass it. And then when I started to actively look for companies abroad for visa sponsorship, I sent another message for my colleague, and he actually said that the company that he was working wasn't actually hiring anymore, but there was a Dutch office, a company that was that he knew that was hiring for software engineering in Amsterdam. And it seems that it was a really good fit for my profile of software engineer in terms of culture, etc. I was working in consultants as well. This was a consultants company. And I took a look at the website, took a look at the software engineer job post, and it was saying something like, you need to have at least 5 years of experience, or you have done a lot of things in a short period of time. And I was like, okay, yeah, let's just apply it. I don't have high expectations, let's just go for it. Then essentially my resume passed the first screening, so got selected to talk with the recruiter, with the HR, and I went through all of the steps, the technical interviews, the behavior interviews, and I passed it. And I would say that I didn't have the best performance on the technical interviews looking bad. I was actually bad. Like, I got the answers right, but it was clear that I didn't have a senior experience, But when essentially I got to the call where they made me the proposal, the salary proposal, the visa proposal, they mentioned one thing, which was like, we saw our GitHub activity. It was like 3,000 activity on this year. And we're really impressive with like the way that you approach studying and personal projects, because inside of Reactor, we want to work with curious people. We want to work with engineers that have their growth mindset. I would say that if it wasn't because of this, if it wasn't because I was consistently studying and I wasn't giving up in the middle of the path to get there, I wouldn't have gotten the opportunity to work at Reactor, which was the company that I work at in the Netherlands. It was amazing. I got the visa sponsorship, did all of the bureaucracy of going to the Dutch embassy in São Paulo and getting my visa. Was the first time that I got my Brazilian passport, because as I mentioned, I never traveled abroad before. I couldn't afford it. And I remember that when I got the interview result, I told my father, and I was like, how do I even get a Brazilian passport? I don't know how to do this. And we went to the government website. We did everything. My parents, they were still trying to process that I managed to pass on the interview, because I was 19 years old. And my parents, they were really concerned that this was some sort of like a scam, and the company was like someone really bad behind that was trying to do something bad with me. And my father even like entered in the company website, try to search for it and stuff. But at the end, like, I managed to convince them that everything was legal, and I really had the job. But I was really young. Like, looking back, like, for a parent to let her daughter to go live abroad in such a young age, it's a really it's a difficult move. It was also my first time living alone at all. I did all the
really impressive, and 19 years old, like, it's amazing. And,
yeah.
And I guess your father was really proud of the investment he did in the English course.
Yeah, it was super nice to see how the outcome came from all of the years of like paying education, and my father was also from a public like background. My father was started as a Navy soldier. He didn't even get into an officer like job in the Navy. So I think it was the first time in the family that someone essentially had such level of achievement in the private industry, and also first time of someone working abroad. That was really nice to be seen, and yeah, it's amazing. But yeah, the rest of the bureaucracy from there was pretty smooth, and I went to the Netherlands, traveled for the first time, had a lot of like stress going around the airports for the first time. I remember when I got there, I was super nervous in the immigration part, and I think we can talk more about this later. But the first weeks, they went pretty smooth. I'm grateful for Reactor because I don't know how it is nowadays, right? It's been a year, but at the past they had like a team which was called Huggy Team, and was pretty much HR, but they had a lot of emphasis on mental health and this regular stuff, which even though it's cliche, but a lot of companies they don't give enough attention on this part. They would pretty much be there with you in the first weeks to give you support for anything. When I got there, there was already an apartment rented for me for the first month, so I didn't really have to go look for apartments right away and be in a hotel paying with my own salary. There was a like apartment for me. I didn't really have to work on engineering projects in the first weeks. I could just do the immigration stuff that I had to do, of like going to the immigration office, taking my residence card, and all of those things. You start looking for apartments, etc. So it was amazing. I didn't have high pressure in the beginning, and there was a lot of folks that was also immigrants working in the company. For you to have an idea, it was more than 20 different nationalities on the Amsterdam office. My best friend was South African, and my other best friend was from Hungary. And yeah, that was also another one that was Dutch, and it was so amazing to like finally be in an environment where I learned it so much from different cultures, and that was the dream like coming true. So it's pretty nice. Technically, it was nice as well. It was the first company that I got the bigger projects. It was like Reactor, just as a reference. Reactor, it's the biggest Finnish company currently. So in Helsinki, for instance, the capital of Finland, they have a huge headquarters in the downtown, which I had the opportunity to travel there with everything paid to work on an internal company event, and it was also a dream coming true to be able to travel internally in Europe just with my work. And there, like when you get graduated in the Helsinki University, the best career move and that everyone dreams of, it's to go to Reactor. It's not to go to Google or Meta. Like that was really nice to see. Well, I am on that level of company. It was pretty cool. And as well, like there was a lot of really huge clients. So the Amsterdam office was responsible for Adidas projects. The e-commerce of Adidas nowadays, adidas.com, this was built by Reactor. And I had access to the engineers that work on that project, so it was really nice. We also did things for Liverpool, Heineken, Shiseido, a lot of those big companies, and we had offices in Tokyo, I think was actually Sweden, Stockholm, and we had just opened an office in Portugal and in Spain, which was really nice as well. And I could travel between those offices. I didn't go to Japan, but I really wanted to. And so the opportunity internally of like learning with all of those engineers across offices was really, really nice. I was exposed to a lot of different scales of projects. I particularly just worked in one project in my entire year at Reactor. That was for a QVC, American television channel, and we worked for the Italy QVC channel. Wasn't necessarily the USA. We built like a mobile app for them for live streaming, which I learned a lot of things in that regard. Was pretty nice. And I also traveled to Italy by work, which was amazing, really cool. But yeah, after 1 year at Reactor, really going short that path, I started noticing that it wasn't really my plan to stay in the Netherlands for more time. So
okay, so let's give this part after some questions.
Okay, let's do this.
And something that I really liked is that this episode is maybe the one I least talked, and it seems that you are really organized with a timeline in your head. That you have this story and you have it really organized, and maybe this helped you a lot in the interview process, because it's a really nice skill to have. Just an observation. But one thing that I would like to bring before we go to the before and after is if you had any embarrassing moment living abroad, because this is a classic question that we always do in our podcast. So if you had one, you could, if you can share with us.
Awesome. So, first of all, I would have to say that the going from a Brazilian culture to a Dutch culture, as we know, living abroad has a huge shift of things, and I started to notice that the Dutch culture, it's much more direct with things, So, and I got there, a lot of my far-away friends, they also used to say, like, in the first weeks they're going to feel attacked by the Dutch folks, but it's not because they are rude, it's because they actually say things straight away. And this was something that I got to experience along the way, and I got to experience why when I landed into the country. Just as a reference as well, I essentially went to the Netherlands in 2021, right? Was when the pandemic had just, I think, started, or was like, it was during pandemic, during COVID, and a lot of those countries, they were with more limited immigration policies, especially to get in for work. And I got my visa quite fast, but I was concerned if I could get in without like vaccination and stuff. So I remember that I brought with me a lot of papers and documents in a case, and I was in the immigration line in the airport, in the Amsterdam airport. Huge line as always, that the airport's like massive, it's always crowded. And I was really afraid because imagine, like, first time abroad, 19 years old, and those thoughts just start like coming to your head, oh, what if I get rejected in immigration? What if I have to go home? I don't have money to buy another airplane ticket, So those things started to come to my head, even though, like, at the end, if something bad happened, the company was going to be there for me, But I remember that I was really afraid, and then I handed all of those documents to the Dutch officer, and I remember like that he looked at me with some like some disappointed face, or like some angry face. I still don't know how to decipher this, and he gave me the documents back. He stamped my password and said, "You can go." But I was so afraid, and because of that was embarrassing for me, because I started to notice that things, they're not going to be that difficult as I was putting it in my head, I would say that this is the one situation that comes to my mind.
Maybe I'm a bit Dutch because sometimes I'm really direct.
Yes, I think this is good, in my opinion. I would like to have more this sort of personality. I think when I started working for American companies as well, a lot of my managers nowadays, they have more this direct feedback approach, and I had to get used to it. I also, one time I said to my best friend at work, like, oh, I think like this person really doesn't like me, and my friend answered, no, it's not because he doesn't like you, it's because he's just giving the facts of the critical thinking straight away. He's not explicitly saying that, you are dumb, or like, you're, I don't know, he doesn't like you, but if you read it right away without having this knowledge that cultures, people have different personalities, especially when changing cultures, it can really hurt you in some way. So I think this was definitely something that I noticed along the way.
Yeah, this at home I have a lot, because I'm a Brazilian, she's a Canadian, so the difference in the culture is really different. So, and at home I don't need to do like at work. I have some tools that I use, that I have to take my message and I have to create a gift, like a box. So I put my message inside the box and I deliver the box. in a nice way instead of being so direct and not respectful sometimes.
Got it.
And at home sometimes I don't have this box and I'm really direct and I say what is coming to my mind and boom, and this can hurt and I know it's not good. So sometimes I have to be careful with this, and it's a soft skill that we have to learn, right?
Yeah, this is really important. I remember that I went to a meetup, like it was even like this year, and there was one guy that he did a whole talk about communication inside of like work environments. He explicitly mentioned IT environments, but I also think that this could be applied to any other like field. And reading communication, being aware of those things, is definitely a soft skill that you're going to learn along the way. I would say that this is one of the most important thing for senior engineers: be able to understand what is your audience and to communicate properly. I'm being really wide here on the communicate properly thing, but definitely something to be mindful about.
Yeah, exactly. And you were supposed to tell us a bit of why you came back, and I cut you.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
before that question, if you could tell us what was the thing you most liked in Amsterdam, and then why you came back, and the thing you most like in Florianopolis. So 3 questions in one.
I love those. I think this is one of the things that I just figured out the answers by actually making the decision, making the call to live abroad, right? Coming back a little bit, as I mentioned, this was my dream, live abroad. And I started to notice that there were things that I didn't really think about because I had to leave the experience in order to visualize trade-offs with more like a better picture. I don't regret, and I will literally do the same thing because I think it changed my life in a lot of aspects. And it's really cool to be able to say to someone, I live in another country. I went through all of this stuff. So coming back and answering your question, I'm going to go through a couple of trade-offs here. Amsterdam was really nice to live in the perspective that everything works well. In terms of bureaucracy, everything is fast, and they have a mobile app for everything. I remember that if I wanted to get something like bureaucracy government related, they have this thing called I think it's ideal. I don't know. It's like a gov.com that we have here in Brazil, gov.br, I think. It's pretty much a mobile app that you can manage all your bureaucracy as a Dutch citizen, and if you are an immigrant, you also have access to it. When COVID vaccinations came, you had an app that you could essentially have your certificate there that was connected to your with your citizen number, and everything was connected with your citizen number. It was like a user ID in a database, basically. So that was amazing. Also, Uber infrastructure, like I don't know how to pronounce the word, but anyway, like infrastructure in general, was amazing to be able to see like the streets well done. The landscape around you was like movies. At least from the cities that I went through and that I live in, was amazing. You didn't have like a noise pollution of cars. A lot of Dutch people, they actually just go to places by bike, and obviously it's different because in Brazil things are really far from each other. We live in a different size of a country compared to the Netherlands, but there they do use a lot of bicycles and public transportation. It's also really cheap, so I would go to everywhere by metro, and it's a good metro. It's not like a bad metro where people smell bad, or like there's like drug dealers or people that are going to hurt you inside of those metros. I remember that I used to take even 1 a.m. those metros alone, and I would still arrive home safely. So, and then connecting to the thing of security, that was also amazing. I didn't have any problems. It was amazing to be able to walk on the streets without having fear. So those are the points, I think. And yeah, maybe last thing, it's just a nice to have. I now I noticed that I talk in more than one, so I'm sorry about that. But the last thing is that it's really cool to be able to travel around Europe really cheap. You know, you can take a train or even go by airplane, and you can travel like in the weekend with like it's like less than half of what you would pay, of course, if you're living in Brazil, because if you're living in Brazil, airplane tickets is much pricey, and you're actually receiving a salary in euros, so everything is on your currency. You don't have to convert. But yeah, those are like all the points. The things that I didn't like, and was the things that was most important for me. Let's just start with salary wise again. I received a salary that was for a mid-level engineer, sort of, and half of my salary went to pay my rent, pretty much. I was living outside of Amsterdam. I was living in a city called Diemen, and it was like 1,500 to live in an apartment that was really, I think, is small. I don't remember exactly the size of it, but it was already half of my salary, and the rest of it, I would essentially have to pay utilities, and then I could save it. I was really young, so being really honest with you, I didn't really invest at all. I was just using to travel, and at a time, I think this made a lot of sense for me because I got to know like more than 5 European countries, and that was important. I think it was a trade-off to make, but the salary wasn't really that higher compared to an American salary or like a Canadian salary. Of course, like I think there's a lot of trade-offs, right? In Europe, you have more days off. The bandwidth of work, it's actually more lighter, and I think the salary, it's also it's smaller because the cost of life there, it's pretty much really cheaper compared to USA or like Canada, depending on the city. So, but I wasn't liking that much. I think for the level of capacity, a lot of my friends, they would say, Laura, you have the skills to have a salary much better than you. There are folks which technically and soft skills have like or bad, and then they also have a salary higher than you, and that doesn't make sense. Like you should strive for more. So I wasn't happy with this. And then second thing, healthy wise, I didn't like the health system in Europe in general, especially in the Netherlands. This family doctor thing, that pretty much everything that you needed to do, it was a lot of time for you to get a medical exam, like to do some bloody tests. That was impossible to do, pretty much. It would take a lot of time, and the doctors, they didn't really have this preventive culture. They would just act if they noticed that was something really bad going on. I didn't like this because, again, I was 19 years old, and if something bad happened with me, my parents, they wouldn't be there. So although I really had best friends, some of them Brazilians, they didn't live with me. So I wanted to have like a good health system around me, and I wanted to build my life like in during the year of like being able to take care of myself. I didn't have the opportunity to do this there, or like I wasn't feeling comfortable. I think when you move with a family, it's actually better because you have a whole support system around you if something goes back. But I was alone, so this was something that I had to bring to the equation, and that was a point. And the third point was the weather. You know, Amsterdam is beautiful to be honest, it's one of the cities that is the most beautiful in the world for me. Some people might might hate me for saying this, but I really think Amsterdam is it's amazing. It's beautiful compared to other cities in Europe, and but the weather isn't really my thing. Like I was aware of this when moving to Amsterdam. I was aware that it was going to be cold, it was going to be rainy, but I didn't know that was going to be so much rainy as it was. Like I remember every day I had to go to the work with a raining jacket, and it was raining with a combination of wind, and that was leaving me with so much stress, like levels of stress. I also had to supplement vitamins that the sun gives you because I think in a week it was pretty rare, like to have a certain amount of sunlight per day, and so I think this started to really affect my health in general, both physically and health and mentally speaking. And I didn't want to live in a country thinking in long term with that weather, to be honest. This got really bad when I also was missing my family and my friends. So, good things about Florianopolis, and that made me come back. Florianopolis is one of the most secure cities in Brazil. I pretty much can also walk in the evening in the street, at least where I live, without getting robbed. And I have amazing hospitals nearby. Essentially, like, it's amazing to live here. And I just got to recognize that I could have a good life working as an engineer living here when I move it abroad. If my family was to live in Rio de Janeiro, I wouldn't go back to Brazil. I like to mention this. I'm really happy that I was born like in this part of the country, and that my parents, they are also originally from here, so they were born in Florianopolis, because I have a support system here. But it's a really expensive city, so I just decided to go back when I got like a good job, and then like living here nowadays, I have amazing weather, sun. It's also really cold in the winter. I like those contrasts. People are really nice. I love the culture here. I love the landscapes. So in a nutshell, those were the things that I took in consideration when coming back.
My co-host of the podcast, Walmyr, he really loves Floripa. And I'm really sure he's gonna like this episode.
Yeah, that's nice. A lot of also an interesting fact that a lot of the engineers that I work nowadays, Americans, they came to Florianopolis and they either like went through vacations here, or a couple of them actually live it for like some years. And I'm starting to see this trend of like other countries immigrating to here, not only like South American countries like Argentina or Venezuela, but there's a Canadian that lives on my building that works on a startup, and I talked to him once, and he was like, yeah, I receive pretty much a salary that I would receive if I was living in Vancouver, but I can live in Florianopolis, and I can spend much more because the Brazilian currency is not even near to the power of the Canadian one. So it's really nice to see that on the city where I live, there's also people from other countries, not only me that goes to another country to work there,
Yeah, that's amazing. And he doesn't have snow too, so this is the perfect world.
Yes.
So Laura, before we finish this episode, do you have any final message that you'd like to share to the public?
Yeah, I would say as an engineer, always think for the growth mindset. I know that it might sound cliche, but try to have a balance on your life and a career. I think we work in a field which you're always using your brain, you're always using your intellectual power, so to speak. And although we don't do like manual work, it can be really like tiring in a daily basis. It takes a lot of effort. So since the beginning of your career, even if you're already in a senior level, take a look back and think about how you can have this growth mindset with balancing mind. I don't want to be a coach, but think about your habits and think about the energy that you put in studying and work and balancing with your personal life, because being aware of those things, it's really going to bring you happiness, because you can balance every single point of the equation, and it's going to make you be in the game for like much more years to come. Focus on like things that are going to make you stay in the IT game, in the IT world, and always like 1% better a day. It's my motto like at the moment, and I would recommend for people to strive for this as well.
That's awesome, and I'm really happy to have you here. Thanks a lot for your time and for sharing your story. It's amazing, and I wish I could have listened this when I was before coming to Canada. It would accelerate me to be here. So I'm pretty sure it's gonna help a lot of people. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. It was really nice, and also think that a lot of like junior engineers and even senior engineers, they are probably going to learn some things here today.
This podcast was edited by Ralf Carneiro.